Hey, this is Austin Weber with Weber Bracketology, where every day is Selection Sunday, and welcome to One Seed Watch, where we take a look at which teams have a chance at getting a one seed come tournament time. And so this is the first one of the year. I usually try to do it around February-ish, just because in college basketball anything can happen. So many teams would be on this list if it was any time earlier. And by February, well, there's a lot of chaos that could still happen. There's just only so many games for teams to move up and then to tumble down. So today we're just going to look at the list of, I think it's 11 teams. I think it's 11 teams that I think have a shot at getting a one seed. As you can see, there's four on my screen right now because I'm looking at resumes with this awesome website, bracketologist.com. It's an easy way to compare teams' resumes next to each other. So we're going to go through these teams' resumes, and we're also going to look at their schedule, see who they've beat, and see who they have coming up that could maybe push them up to a one seed if possible. But all these 11 teams have a shot, I think. These four specifically that are on your screen, I think they don't have a very good shot. I think it would take a lot of chaos above them, and they don't. Probably most of them have to win out. As you can see, there's three Big 12 teams, so those three teams couldn't all win out. Just because of the Big 12 tournament, I'm not completely sure who plays each other just off the top of my head. But yeah, so we're going to go through these first four teams and take a look at what they have done so far this year and what they can do. And so the first team, we're going to look at UCLA from the Pac-12 first. And I don't think they have a very good shot just because they really haven't played quality opponents, and that's kind of because of the Pac-12. I mean, the Pac-12 only has two guaranteed tournament teams, and one of them is UCLA. The other one's Arizona, who we'll talk about in a bit. There's USC on their schedule, who they split with, and Arizona State is kind of, they're on the bubble, but they're not really on the good side of it right now. So UCLA, I mean, they have a very high net ranking. Their metrics love them. Strength of schedule, I mean, at 49, that's where the Pac-12 comes into play. It's mostly because they're out of conference schedule. We'll take a look at who they played in just a moment, but they've never lost at home, so all their losses are neutral site or away from home. 6 wins away from home is very good, so they have that going for them, but it's the three quad one wins. I mean, the 3 and 4 in the quad one, the four losses, that's nothing. That's where all their losses are, so that's okay. It's really the three quad one wins, and if we take a look at who they have remaining on their schedule, so at Oregon might be quad one by the end of the year. Same with at Utah. And then obviously the home game against Arizona would be as well. And maybe a game. I don't really know if anyone besides Arizona in the Pac-12 tournament would be. So it would take winning out and probably some losses above them. But the fact that they have a high net ranking and only 4 losses bodes well for them, because if we look at who they've played this year, Illinois and Baylor, if they had just won one of those games, I really think they'd have a great shot at being a one, but they obviously didn't. At Maryland, that's a good win. It was a big win, but Maryland's going to be in the tournament. Kentucky, they're looking really close to the bowl. Kentucky is really hard to tell right now where they are. I'm probably thinking they're out at this very moment. So that win, it's still a good win. It's I believe neutral. Yeah, that was a neutral site game. But yeah, so UCLA, not a great shot. Then we're going to take a look at these Big 12 teams. We're going to start with Baylor, who maybe has the best chance of these teams. It's really hard to tell. Look at that strength of schedule really stands out there. Just outside the top 10 in the net, which they can obviously move up, especially with the games that they're going to have left on their schedule. And that's still good enough for a one seed being that high. Very good out of conference schedule. Obviously, all Big 12 teams are going to have great strengths of schedule in general because of how tough the conferences. But then we look at their 7 quad 1 wins. They only have 7 wins outside of quad 1 and 2, which, I mean, for 17-6 record, that's pretty good. They're 10-6 against the top 2 quadrants. So that's really going to bode well for them. Where are they up here? So I'm going to take a look at their schedule. Obviously, the loss to Virginia kind of sucks because that would have been a great win for them. They'd be much higher at this point. The UCLA win, they beat UCLA, who we just talked about. So that there's that head-to-head there that kind of gives them the bump against UCLA if the situation calls for it. Losing to Marquette, don't even think about the fact that it was by 26 points. That would have been a great win to have. But they did get the Gonzaga win. So out of conference, I mean, Gonzaga, UCLA, those are wins from 2 teams that are going to be on the 2 through 4 line for sure come tournament time. But then outside of that, the Big 12, there's lots of beating each other up. But as we go through them, they lost to Iowa State, TCU, and Kansas State. To those last two at home, one of those would have really helped. Then they beat some lesser teams in the Big 12. The win against Kansas was huge, beating Arkansas, obviously. But yeah, so who they have left? I mean, at TCU on Saturday, that's a great chance to boost their resume. TCU is kind of falling a little bit. They have had some injuries. But then they have at Kansas, obviously, a win in Fog Allen is like the best win you could get. They got at Kansas State, and then they host Texas, at Oklahoma State, host Iowa State. So they have so many chances. If they win out, it'd be hard to not think that they could be a 1 seed. But obviously, it's the Big 12, so winning out is not easy. Then we're going to take a look at Iowa State. They're right there in the net. Their metrics are all fine. Slightly lower strength of schedule. I mean, that's going to be due to their out-of-conference strength of schedule. Away from home, they are 4-6, not great. Baylor, I didn't mention, they're 6-4. That's a very good record away from home. Like Baylor, 7 quad 1 wins. I mean, very similar records. They just have one less game played at this point. So it's a very similar resume when you look at it metric wise, except for the road record. They haven't lost at home while Baylor lost twice, but it's the winning away from home really benefits you. And then we're going to take a look at their schedule. So, I mean, they had the win against Villanova, the win against North Carolina. Those are good early season wins. I mean, Villanova obviously hasn't looked like a very good win at this point, but I mean, they started off the year strong, so they built a resume really early. The losses to UConn and Iowa out of conference, those are two tournament teams. Then they got the win against Baylor. They got the win at TCU. Lost at Lawrence, a very close game. They beat Texas, who we're going to talk about later. They beat Kansas State. The loss against Missouri, not too bad. Texas Tech lost. That's the worst team in the Big 12. So that one kind of hurt a little bit. They beat Kansas. And so the remaining, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, those are still tournament teams. TCU, Kansas, Texas. Well, really, they only have one game left on the schedule that isn't a tournament team. So winning out will obviously put them in contention. And then the last of these four teams we're going to take a look at is Kansas State, who I think just based on their out-of-conference schedule is really good. That's really where their resume hurts because we'll take a look in a moment, but they had maybe one good win there. But as you can see, that 287th ranked out-of-conference strength of schedule really hurts. Away from home, 6-4, still a good record. 6 quad 1 wins, a little bit less. They had a quad 2 loss, which the other three teams didn't have, but that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Let me take a look at their, yes, as you can see, their out-of-conference schedule. UTRGV, I can't even remember what that is. Rio Grande, whatever the V stands for. At Cal, not a good team. Kansas City, not a good team. Rhode Island, not a good team. The Nevada win is their good win because Nevada is trending upwards. That should almost certainly be a tournament team on the resume. They beat LSU, hasn't turned up very good. Losing at Butler, hard place to play, but Butler just hasn't been very good this season. As you can see, nothing really good on their schedule until conference play, where they came out really strong with wins against West Virginia, at Texas, at Baylor. They beat Oklahoma State, lost against TCU. They beat Kansas in overtime, great win. Texas Tech lost to Iowa State. This is where they started to fall off a little bit. They did beat Florida, who was kind of on a bit of an upswing, but they're not looking like a tournament team at this point. They lost to Kansas and Texas, and then they beat TCU. But if they had beaten either Kansas or Texas, I would have given them a better shot. But Kansas State is going to need some help, especially when 3 of the remaining 7 games are against the 2 Big 12 teams that aren't going to be in the tournament. And then Oklahoma State and West Virginia are fringe tournament teams at this point. So really it's the Iowa State and Baylor, which are both home games, which is good for them because those will still be quad 1 wins. But yeah, so Kansas State, not a great shot, but it's the Big 12. They got the tournament still. They have a shot. Moving on to the 7 teams that I think the 4 1 seeds will come from this group. At this point, it's looking like that at least. So we're going to start off with Houston, number one in basically every metric. Obviously, KPI, you see they're number four, but still, they're number one in pretty much every metric. Strength of schedule, out of conference, it was good. In conference, being the American, it falls a little bit. But obviously, 22-2, great record. And away from home, they are 10-0 away from home. That's going to be big. Have only 4 quad 1 wins, but 7 quad 2 wins. They do have 1 win outside in quad 3, but let's take a look at their schedule. Oral Roberts, that's a good win. That's a tournament team. They won at Oregon. They beat St. Mary's. That win just got much better. They do have a loss to Alabama, which should come into play head-to-heads. They won at Virginia, so they have good wins out of conference. And in conference, UCF's a decent team. Winning at Cincinnati, that's a tough team. At Tulane, Temple lost. Temple's been good, so I'm not going to knock them too much for that one. Again, UCF again, Cincinnati again. That was a tough game. Then they did win at Temple. But on the way out, they do have Memphis twice, and they have a home game against Tulane. So that's 3 resume building wins right there. Tulane might be a quad 2 or 3 win at home, but Memphis, at least on the road, is a quad 1 win. It can be a quad 2 win other than at home. But still, Houston, with their metrics, if they're number 1 in the net, end of the year, only 2 losses, even 3. I think they're a 1 seed. Just the eye test, they have looked dominant. Like if you look at their 2 losses, they lost to Temple by 1, and to Alabama in a very hard fought game by 6. So really, Houston just needs to keep beating the teams they need to, and 2 wins against Memphis will go a long way for them, I think. And then next up, we have Tennessee, who is number 2 in most metrics. As KPI, it's a little different there. But strength of schedule, 53. The SEC hasn't been as great. It's really hard when a lot of these teams are from the Big 12. You're comparing these strength of schedules in conference, and the Big 12 teams blow them out of the water. 19-4, only 4 losses. 8-3 away from home. Great record away from home. And like Houston, only 4 quad 1 wins and only 4 quad 2 wins for them. So right now, I don't think Tennessee's on the 1 line. They can get up there, and we'll take a look at their schedule in a second. Let's look who they've beat. The loss against Colorado, that one kind of hurts. This USC win's getting better as USC is improving. The Kansas win's huge. Could come into play head-to-head as well. The Maryland win, neutral, is a good win. They did lose to Arizona, not a bad loss at all, as you want to talk about them very soon. Then we go in conference. Mississippi State's a decent win. They lost to Kentucky. That's a fringe bubble team. Not the end of the world. But as you can see, they did beat Texas, which head-to-head could come in there. I say head-to-head could come in, but that very rarely will come into play. But Texas has a good shot of being a 1 seed as well, so that's a big win. Lost to Florida hurts. Beating Auburn is fine, but on the rest of the way, they do have Missouri and Alabama at home. They have at Kentucky, they have at Texas A&M, they host Arkansas, and they're at Auburn. So they have chances to build up the resume, get a few more quad 1 wins, some quad 2 wins. So Tennessee, outside the top 4 seeds, I think right now, but they're really close. They have a really good shot. And next is going to be Alabama, who I think is definitely right now a 1 seed. As you can see, they're number 3 in the net. So obviously very good, great metrics. Out of conference strength schedule, top 10. That's what you like to see. Strength of record is number 2. They're 20-3. Away from home, they are 9-3. Very good record. They have 6 quad 1 wins, and that's where all their losses are as well. So very good looking resume. As we look at who they beat, Liberty, that's a good win there. That's a possible tournament team. Michigan State tournament team. UConn loss, not bad. North Carolina win, that's a tournament team. The Houston win at Houston is huge. I mean, if you just look at the fact that that's the number 1 team in the net and on the road, that's the best win of the year. They got the Memphis win there. They did lose to Gonzaga, not a bad loss at all. Then you got Mississippi State win on the road. You beat Kentucky. You won at Arkansas. I mean, you got to win against Missouri. They did lose to Oklahoma by quite a bit, and that kind of stings. But I mean, Oklahoma's better than their record indicates. I think they're like 12-10 right now, and obviously that's in the Big 10, Big 12. For the rest of the year, they've got Florida actually the night I'm recording this, so that result will likely have happened by the time you see this video. And they've got at Auburn, at Tennessee, then they got home games against Arkansas, Auburn, and at Texas A&M. So they have plenty more opportunities to keep building their resume. But I foresee, like Houston, I foresee Alabama as one of those 4-1 seeds. I think it'll take a bit for them to fall off. They do have South Carolina and Georgia on there, which Georgia's not that bad, but South Carolina, that'd be a bad loss. So really, if they lose maybe 1 or 2 games the rest of the year, I think they're fine. Even 3, I think they're fine. Then we go to the team who is, I think, undoubtedly the #1 team in the country right now. Maybe that I haven't looked at it at all times. I mean, they have Zach Edey, it's Purdue. They're 4 in the net, very high metrics. They're fine there. Good strength of schedule. Out of conference, 95. That's not really going to hurt them too much. 22-2, tied with Houston for the best record of these teams that they're going to be at the top. Away from home, they have 11 wins, 11-1, with 9 quad 1 wins. That's the second most behind Kansas, who we're going to look at next. So, I mean, just on paper, this resume looks like it could be the best team in the country. And then we take a look at who they've played. I mean, they beat Marquette. The out of conference is where Purdue shined, especially because the Big Ten has been a little down this year. They have a number of tournament teams, but they don't have as many top-tier teams. So they beat Marquette, they beat West Virginia, Gonzaga, Duke. That's 4 tournament teams. And that was in the span of 12 days. That was a huge stretch for them, and they really didn't slow down after that. I mean, they lost to Rutgers by 1 point. That was their only loss until they just lost to Indiana. I mean, they won at Ohio State, at Penn State, maybe not the best wins, but on the road, at Michigan State. See, they played some close games throughout the year. They've played a lot of close games, and I think that's the reason why they're not so high in the net. They beat Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State. They lost to Indiana. So I think they have their 9 quad 1 wins are huge. It's their out of conference play that's pretty much almost solidified them a #1 seed at this point. I mean, and the rest of the year, mostly tournament teams. If you take a look at it, it's Iowa, that's tournament team. Northwestern on the road, that's tournament team. Maryland, tournament team. Ohio State's not, but then Indiana again, Wisconsin, Illinois. So they have a lot more opportunities to even build this resume up more. But the tough games also means more opportunities for losses. And I think the way Purdue is playing, especially with Zach Edey, they should be fine. I don't really see them worrying about dropping from the 1 line unless they start losing games. And then next, the team that I think is the 4th #1 seed right now, along with Houston, Purdue, and Alabama, is Kansas. 8 in the net. They've got obviously great metrics. The #1 strength of schedule, and that's in the Big 12. So they have the toughest schedule, very tough out of conference schedule. 19-5, and though they haven't looked great at times this year, they're 7-4 away from home. They have 10 quad 1 wins. That's the most in the country. That's where their losses are as well. So I think really it's that 10 quad 1 wins that really speaks for itself on how tough their schedule has been. I mean, they beat Duke, they beat NC State, Wisconsin. They have a loss to Tennessee. Obviously not a bad loss at all. They beat Missouri. They beat Indiana. They've beat Oklahoma State. They've beat West Virginia. They've beat Iowa State. They lost Kansas State, lost TCU, lost to Baylor. They had a few of those losses in a row, but obviously those are all teams that are going to be on the top 5 or 6 lines come tournament time. They beat Kentucky on the road. They did beat Kansas State. When they lost to Iowa State, I was getting a little worried, but then they went and they beat Texas. And if Texas had won that game, Texas would be on the 1 line for me. But great wins, and the rest of the way out, every team except for Texas Tech and Oklahoma are tournament teams. They have a lot of good chances to continue to build that resume, and they can end this year with like 13, 14 quad 1 wins if they continue playing the way they are. Yeah, I see at least 4 or 5 opportunities for quad 1 wins plus the tournament. Kansas is going to be on the top 2 lines just because of their quad 1 wins alone and how good they've been this year. But if they just keep winning, obviously they'll stay up there. Then we'll take a look at Texas, who's I think is just behind Kansas right now. They're 9 in the net. Strength schedule #6 out of conference. They didn't do a lot out of conference, and that's where Tennessee and them are kind of close for me. I think Texas might be a little bit ahead right now. I haven't really looked at them that closely, but the reason is because of the 8 quad 1 wins. That's a lot of quad 1 wins and no loss outside of there, which Tennessee does have. But then we take a look at who they've played. I mean, they got the Gonzaga win. That was a big win to start the year. And they have the Creighton win, which, while Creighton was on a 6-game losing streak, that was during their 6-game losing streak, they have continued to play really well through the year. So that's a big win at this point. Lost to Illinois isn't bad. But then, other than that, they had a really weak out-of-conference schedule. Then you get into conference play, they lose to Kansas State, high-scoring game. They beat Oklahoma State, beat TCU, beat Texas Tech, lost to Iowa State, beat West Virginia, Oklahoma State, lost Tennessee, beat Baylor, beat Kansas State. And so, remaining on their schedule, they have West Virginia, Iowa State, Baylor, TCU, and they got Kansas at home. So those are really good chances for them to continue to build their resume in the strong Big 12. And the last team that I think has a shot at a 1 seed at this point, we're going to look at Arizona. They're 10th in the net. They're 21-3, but again, they're in the Pac-12, which they're the best team in that conference. Them and UCLA are pretty close for who's better, but in my opinion, they're the better team in the conference. So they really have a lot of chances to get big wins. I mean, as you can see, they do have 6 quad 1 wins, which is good. They do have a quad 3 loss, and so their 6 quad 1 wins is why I think they're up here. And as we take a look at their schedule, beat Cincinnati, that's a good team. Ooh, I scrolled up. Beat San Diego State and Creighton. That was 3 good wins to start the year. The Utah loss, it hasn't been very good, but I mean, it was on the road, so it doesn't hurt too much. They have the Indiana win, the Tennessee win, Arizona State in conference. The Washington State loss hurts, and the Oregon loss would have been a good win to have on the road. They did beat USC and UCLA at home. They did beat Oregon at home. And then really they end the year against Arizona State and at USC and at UCLA, which are going to be huge if they get those wins, and then they maybe win out in the Pac-12 tournament. I think they have a good shot at getting a 1 seed. They really just can't afford any more bad losses than what they have. But yeah, those are the 11 teams I think have a shot. The list is going to dwindle each week as teams lose, maybe that are a little further off, and as teams that are at the top win. It becomes impossible for those teams lower down to get all the way back up. But if you enjoyed this, go to Bracketology.com for weekly brackets and stuff like that, more content. And then YouTube, I'm going to be uploading videos here as well. But yeah, thank you so much for checking it out, and I hope you have a great March Madness season.